Alright, gamers, we are going into the day-glow tinged wastelands of the Neon Lords of the Toxic Wasteland. Full disclosure, I got this game as a promotional PDF from the designer. Fuller disclosure, I was going to buy this game anyway. Fullest disclosure, I'm still probably going to buy a hard copy edition of this game. This is part one of the look at it. Part two is when I actually get a bigger group together to play this game with a full party. The design of this game is for anywhere between 2 and 7 players. It looks like mathematically, if you look at the charts and how the charts interact, the magic number for this game to have everything balanced out looks like it's 4 players. But I'm going to have to play it a couple of times to see if that is true. But with that, let's go into this game. I'm going to tell you, when I saw this game on the internet, I saw it on a random Facebook group. It immediately caught my eye. It looked like something that was cool, but I was in a hurry, didn't really look into it. My brother and I were discussing later games that we saw, and we both brought this up. And, I said, did you see this? He said, yeah, I did. I think it's something like Gamma World. I said, I don't know. I don't think it is. I think it's something different. I spoke to another friend of mine who saw it, and he said, yeah, it looks like it's like a Thundar the Barbarian game. And, this game stripped all of those expectations and, threw them away. This is like, Thundar the Barbarian on crack. This is the meth lab behind, the Kingdom of Ooh from Adventure Time. This is a post-apocalyptic Earth like no other. It is, it is a homage to so many different things, and it's done so well. This book was put together with care. The game system was designed with care. There's an intentionality to this game that you don't see in some other products. It is a love letter to a lot of different genres. It is a love letter to the youth of Generation X, especially the Zillennials. This is a great game that's going to be filled with nostalgia. If you play this game, you're probably going to run into a lot of people sitting there saying, hey, do you remember this? Hey, do you remember that? Talking about old music videos. This is the game for the gamer that thought that Rust in Peace was better than the Black Album. This is for the gamer who didn't want any of the other Ninja Turtles but wanted the, Muckman figure. This is for the gamer who wanted the Sharkticons, who thought the Sharkticons and the Junktabots were like the real heroes of Transformers. It is, such a wonderful homage, but not a ripoff. It's a retro game. It's OSR, certainly, because it's based off of D&D's BX rules, but it is not like a retro clone. It's a homage to different genres, but it's its own beast, so to speak. So with that, we could talk about going into creating characters. Now, please bear with me. The PDFs seem to be loading slowly on my devices today, so if it doesn't pop up right away, just be patient with me. But when you go into character creation is already part of the game. So as soon as you start making a character, you are already playing the game. Character creation is pretty straightforward, but in this one, you roll your stats first, and your stats are pretty, straightforward, stats from any other game, with a couple of exceptions, which I'll get into in a second. But you roll your stats first, and you roll 3d6, no adjustments. You roll 3d6 for your 6 ability scores, and you keep going right down the list, and then you can swap them out once, right? So it is pretty hardcore that way. You know, it is not like 3.5 D&D rules where you just, you know, the different ways you could do that, the merciful ways. This is it. But like I said, this is already part of playing the game because the character creation has, I think the designers have made this in a way that it immerses you into the world by this. And I'll show you why. So you go and you make your character class, you generate your stats. Then you pick your class. And once you pick your class, then you roll what is called your ability scores, your class score for that. And I will show you what that looks like and why that is. Give me a second for where my Chromebook to catch up. But yes, and you know, the character classes in here are, some of them are tropes that you find in other games. So you have the tank that deals out a lot of damage, your barbarian and stuff like that. But they also have something else, another flavor to them that makes them their unique creation. Like other OSR games, each one has its own hit die. They have their own amount of XP needed to level up. But, their abilities make them stand out. And the nice thing about their abilities is that one of them is called the class score or the class roll. And what you do is you roll that like any other ability, and that gives you your class points. Your class points are spent on special actions that only your class can do. And so, for example, the Bruticorn is, yes, if you take a look at this, it is a cybernetic bighorn. So it's not a unicorn, it has two horns. But this is a character class that you could play as, a cybernetic unicorn. I really wish I knew what would put them in the mindset that they created this character class, but it is a wonderful piece of post-apocalyptic imagination. But if you take a look at it, you have it tells you what your abilities are, and then it tells you what you can spend your class points on. Now, if you spend too many class points per day, things start to go awry. So your class points can be spent for your class-related abilities, like I said, but if you spend too many, so for example, if you go below 5 points per day, then you have to roll on this table, which will tell you that, something horrible has befallen your character. And the lower you push your points, the more terrifying and devastating the results. And, in true brutal old school fashion, there is times when your character can die. Usually in a hilarious manner. It is, it's something that kind of balances out the game, so you're not abusing class abilities, but it's also not a way to punish characters. This is a game that is really not meant to be taken seriously. This is a game that is fun. It is lighthearted. Your characters are going to die, and that's going to be okay. It's going to be funny. So, yeah. But, one thing that, when I tell you that, the character creation process is already playing the games. So if you roll up a character and your character is not, the stats aren't great, or you don't have a stat good enough to be the character class that you want, there is a game mechanic of sacrificing your character over to the Chaos Lords and re-rolling the stat and then adding 1d4 to a unique ability score called your SLEAZE score. SLEAZE is a unique mechanic. This is a mechanic where it is almost like, if you ever played any of the games that have like an honor system, this is like anti-honor. The higher your SLEAZE score, the more you are perceived as a member of GWAR. You are just this skeezy monster. If you go too high, human settlements will immediately prepare to attack and kill you. But there are some classes that the SLEAZE score is necessary. But I think that was a great idea. So instead of having this rule that's saying like, oh yeah, okay, you can just, scrap an ability, re-roll it, add a bonus, and then you get 1d4 to your SLEAZE score. They said, you could sacrifice your character to the Chaos Gods. And again, I think it adds a flavor to the character creation that already immerses you into the game. So once you have your characters generated, you rolled your class ability score, you get to finish out by picking a hairstyle. I love this. The hairstyle mechanic makes this even funnier because each hairstyle has its own unique ability for you or a bonus for you. And, it's not just hairstyle, it's also facial hairstyle. I just think it's great. I thought this was such a great piece of the game. But it is something to be said. Again, it adds to the flavor of the game. And then, with that, so does the mechanics. The mechanics add to the flavor and the feel of the game. The game in and of itself, it's based off of D&D's BX roles. So if you are a player who is familiar with that, you're not going to see anything earth-shattering in this, right? You have your standard array of role-playing dice. You roll the dice. If your class has an ability that you got to roll percentile, you roll percentile. Nothing earth-shattering, right? Well, the author of the game has added some mechanics that are really, really good ideas when it comes in terms of adding flavor to the game. So one of it is the Neon Blast roll. So the Neon Blast roll is one where if you roll max damage on a die, you roll that die again and add it. And, it is ridiculous. It comes into play. I think I saw it mostly with firearms and stuff like that. But, it could create a horribly blood splattering encounter, which I thought that was actually pretty funny. Another one is the to the max rule. And that is if you roll a natural 20. A natural 20 to the max, you get to roll on unique table for each character class. So each character class has a to the max table that if you roll a critical, a natural 20, that means you roll on that and then you read the hilarious results. I thought that was actually pretty funny. I thought it was a unique mechanic. All right. So now you're probably asking yourself, well, I talked about the flavors, I talked about the character classes. What exactly are you doing? What kind of game world are you playing in? Well, this is the world that Bill and Ted failed to save. This is the rule that, every nation on the face of the planet decided to launch their nukes at the same time as an alien invasion. It is this weird and messed up post-apocalyptic universe, post-apocalyptic world. It is one that has mystical sorcery, high technology, so you have firearms and guns and, firearms and spells flinging everywhere. But it's not a game system where things feel tacked on. It is not one that things feel hammered in. It is a game system, a game world that integrates all of this together very well. The story is, kind of fragmented, and it's kind of thrown. It's kind of thrown together. It's kind of thrown at you, but it's not hammered in. So it's not, over the top, but it is not, so confining and so detailed that, your players cannot have their say in their imagination, or a neon lord, as the game master is called in this, create their own nuances to the game. But in any event, you play in this, pseudo medieval world. And your characters are going out into the wastelands, looking at subterranean dungeons, looking for pre-war technology. Your generic post-apocalyptic tropes will do well in here. You could probably adapt any adventure. Like if you had an adventure for Rifts, you could probably adapt it to this. And like I said, it is done very well. And the game system is one that makes it lighthearted, and the game rules and the game fiction all tie into that. It is very lighthearted. It is very, it sets a mood, right? It sets a mood, and your players will do well to go ahead and just, have a movie night where you watch The Warriors, Hell Comes to Frogtown, The Terminator, I said earlier that this is a game that incorporates a lot of different influences, but is not a ripoff of them, and that is true. There's just so many different films and toy lines and stuff. Like when I first picked up this book, I immediately wanted to go and play my Genesis and boot up the game, play the game Gain Ground. I started wondering about whatever happened to all of my muscle men. What did I ever do with them? I really like the way that this game sets its fiction, that gives you the world information and tells you that like the bogus age, and now you're in the gnarly age. This is a world where, if Idiocracy went completely meltdown and post-apocalyptic, this would probably be the next phase of that world. But if you take a look at this art, I love this art because it invokes like that early 90s role-playing art. So if you ever played like Chainsaw Warrior, it kind of invokes that. It kind of invokes like old wrestling art, like WWF art from that era. And it incorporates it very well. Love the artwork. I love the Brudicorn. Let's face it, I would get him tattooed somewhere. Not someplace visible, but I'd get him tattooed somewhere. But there is little details in this game and in this book that really sell the world, right? It sells it and it makes you feel nostalgic for your past. Like the cyber skin, right? The cyber skin is a cyborg, not unlike the Terminator, but they all look like Ronald Reagan. I thought that was a great touch. I don't think they could have picked it. I think they could have gone with Bush Sr. as well and still, did a good job. But I think Ronald Reagan was probably the better choice. Again, the designer of this game really put thought into the artwork and the aesthetics and how that all ties in. Let me just back up to a particular piece of artwork that I thought was great. And it's very small, right? So, and just, I love this warning. If you're not, someone that is a zillennial, You may not have ever seen that sticker. Back in the day, children, gather around. Uncle James is going to tell you a story. Back in the day, we used to have to go to actual businesses to rent VHSs, and they would have that sticker on there. But, look at that, the Super Savage Systems, right? That is the company, but like that invokes the Sega Genesis logo. And I think that was done very intentionally, and I think that's such a great piece of artwork, that a great logo that incorporates everything into the game. I think that was really, really a good choice. But again, it shows you, it sets you up for the theme of this world. It sets you up for the theme of the game. And another piece, and I'm going to have to go really through, so give me a second. I think I went too far. And again, we just got to let this catch up. But again, it's such a great game. It incorporates a lot of stuff well. Like, it incorporates the magic system well. It incorporates the spells and firearms really well. It doesn't seem like it's hammered together or forced in. Like when I played Rifts when I was younger, Rifts, every new book, like, they would say, oh, this is like fully compatible with Rifts. But like, it seemed like you had to hammer it in, and it didn't really flow well. This, it all works. The firearms, the combat, the spells, the other mysticism. Give me a second. I think I wrote down the wrong page, because there is a great page on here that shows what I'm talking about. And again, things seem to be loading up very slowly today. Of course, when I'm making a video, this is when things go awry. Just my luck. I ran out of luck points. Let me check something real quick. And it was funny because, like, a couple of my friends all saw this game and we had no idea what it was. We all looked at the same title and drew our own conclusions as to what the game is. And we were all wrong. This is a game that really outstripped all of our expectations, and it's a unique creature. It is very invocative. If you read this book and you looked at the in-your-face attitude and some of the crass humor in it, you wouldn't be wrong if you compared it to the game Whole, the human-occupied landfill, that came out, oh gosh, at least 20 years ago, if not more. But it's that crass in-your-face humor, but it's not like offensive. It is not, the book doesn't go out of its way to offend you, but it's still that same type of humor. And, if you enjoyed that type of humor, this is a game for you. And this is definitely not a game for the serious gamer. If you have players that, like, I have met players that have told me, like, I've been playing the same character for D&D since 1982 to today, and they're very serious into their role playing, which I respect. That's what they're into. I cannot fault them for that, but this would not be the game for them. This is a game where, the way I would play this game is that my regular gaming crew had other things to do and there was only a few of us left to play the game. This is the game I would probably crack out for those few sessions, right? But this is definitely a book that I'm going to buy just to have, because it is such a great book to read. It is such a great book to have in my collection because it makes me feel the feels. The nostalgia is great. And, again, it is like the crack alley behind Thundar's house. You're not going to, you're going to weave some extra special tales, but and you're probably going to have some really funny stories to tell, especially if the dice explode, and you roll super high damage and you turn something into mush. And unfortunately, the creatures in this game can also do that to you as well. All right. Well, I'm not going to bore you by flipping through every page to try to find that particular piece of artwork, but there is pages in here where they send it looks like a printout from a printer that had the sides of the page that had the holes for the gears, right? If you weren't there, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But way back in the day, you used to have paper with the feed, and you had to pull that side off, those side holes off on the perforation marks. Now, with that, I'm going to go back into the way this book is actually physically set up. Because, again, Brian, who is the author and creator of this game, I think really understands what players need. So he gives a very, very full bestiary with this. So he gives you a lot of creatures that you can throw your characters, at right away. Now, some games, there were some games that will say we have an expansive bestiary of 28 creatures. It's oh, come on, man, you could do better than that. This game actually delivers. It gives you a full bestiary. They're actually also just well thought out monsters. It is a wonderful addition. I like that. I love it that when a game designer gives you those options. And I think there's almost 100 different creatures that he gives you. And they're not just stats thrown together. They're actually thoughts put into them. But also he gives us, stuff that we could print out to use in our game. These VTTs, the virtual tabletop tokens, are becoming more and more common. Some books make you buy them separately. Some of them were stretch goals for Kickstarters. This is one that he gives it to you right off the bat. And essentially, when you buy this main book, you are buying everything you need to play this game. You don't need a Dungeon Master's Guide, a player's handbook, or a monster manual. It's all in one book. The PDF clocks in at 250 plus pages. It's great. There is a downside to this game, and there is two big downsides to this game. Or I should say there is actual, three downsides. So one of them is that if you have players that are younger, they may not get this game. They may not enjoy the game as much as players who were, alive in the late 80s, early 90s. They didn't know the heyday of comic books like Blue Loco or Heavy Metal. I was a preteen in the early 90s, and there was some stuff that I looked at but didn't quite fully understand, and I'm looking at it now with a different set of nostalgia than some of my older friends. I have friends that are in their later 50s, and they look at the nostalgia very differently, but we still have that shared nostalgia. So if you have someone that is a younger player, maybe a teenager or someone in their early 20s in your group, they may not get it. They may not enjoy it as much. I've talked to some of my students about They Live, and they kind of looked at me with a blank face. I said, "Oh, it starred Rowdy Piper." No idea who that was. Or Macho Man Randy Savage. They had no idea who it was. So they may not get it. The next was that I had to read the character creation rules a few times. Not that it was overly complex, but the class ability score was kind of a weird thing to get my head wrapped around. So I had to read it a few times to get it, and your players may be like that as well. You may have to sit down and talk to them about that a few times to go over what that actually means and how to use the points. And then the last thing about it is that you might have players that are put off by the over-the-top silliness of the game. They may look at the over-the-top silliness and not realize that there is actually a great mathematically balanced game underneath it. And that, things are, at least from what I've run in various dice scenarios, looks like a very good and balanced game, and that the game system is tweaked to have these over-the-top moments. There is a mechanic, like the rule of cool, which if a player wants to do something that, like, in your mind would look totally awesome in an action movie, go ahead and let them do it. They may not get that. And I understand that. Like, this game is not for everyone. If you had someone who told you that their favorite game was Vampire the Masquerade, this is probably not the game for them. But, at the end of the day, even if you're never going to find players who would want to play this with you, this is definitely a game that I would recommend reading simply for the nostalgia. Everyone of a certain age that I've shown this game to have really loved the game. They loved the nostalgia. Everybody that I've shown it to has said, this reminds me of blank, and it was something completely different. Nobody said the same thing twice. It is definitely a worthy addition to your shelf. But I would totally think that, you have to find people that are the proper people to play this game. So with that in mind, as soon as I get a team together, a group together, we're going to play this game, and then I'm going to put up part 2 of this, and I will tell you how that went. I would like to thank Savage Systems for giving me a promotional copy. I'd like to thank Brian Shutter for reaching out and giving me a promotional copy. And until next week, gamers,